Hello. Hello, everybody. So we are going live again. What an exciting day it has been, and what an exciting weekend it has been. So we are already at guest number 10 now. Time flies. And now we are with Matteo Borrini. Where are you now, sir, right now? You're in Liverpool.
Yes, so good afternoon to everyone all around Europe and the world from Liverpool, from Stair Evan Road in Liverpool.
So we have Christian Chelman say hello, Siragusa Fabio, Channing Thomas, Stefano Cavanna, Francesco Busani.
Oh, a lot of magician friends.
Yes, that you can't get rid of them, right? Yeah, it's amazing because we just met because Luca Volpe did his thing.
Exactly. So the word and the connection are absolutely amazing.
It's absolutely amazing, yes. Because I'm just doing this whole thing because of Luca. Because he kind of showed me that this can be done. So I'm going to leave all you guys alone with Matteo in a minute. Just a quick thing. You're an anthropologist.
Yes.
You're a scientist, a scholar. You're a magician.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really envy you for being also kind of a real life Indiana Jones.
Well, in some way, yes, because my background is in archaeology. And then I found myself inside very interesting research that go from the Shroud of Turin to looking for bodies of soldiers around the world as a forensic anthropologist to the topic of tonight that is vampires.
Okay, so guys, I'm going to leave you with Matteo for a while and he will tell you everything about the guys with the pointy fangs.
Well, as I have been introduced, I am a forensic anthropologist, so I am a scientist. However, I believe in vampires, and I'm absolutely sure that vampires are real. When I say vampires are real, I'm not talking about the Desmodus rotundus, the little bat with the fangs that actually are not canine but are incisor, that is used to drink blood from cows. I do not refer to mosquitoes that are hematophagous insects, so insects that are drinking the blood. No, I'm referring to the proper vampire from the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, the one that have been later, in the 19th century, described in novel. I'm talking about the undead, the revenant. So, the proper classical vampire. But how a scientist can believe in vampire? Well, that is a question that I ask to myself as well. How I can believe in vampire? Well, first of all, let's go with this kind of books. For example, this is the Dissertazioni sopra le apparizioni dei spiriti e sopra I vampiri o redivivi, and have been written by Agostino Calmet. And we are back in if we look here, exactly the day, we are back in the 18th century. So, what is this dissertatio? Dissertatio means thesis, dissertation on the apparition of spirits and vampires and undead. This is the literary translation. Well, if we go into this book, we read that people were, in those days, and even before, as I say, 16th, 17th century, they were exhuming bodies of undead people. Or better, they were exhuming bodies of people that were believed to be dead. But when they were opening the coffins, They found the body that was in some way alive. The color of the skin was nice and pink. The skin appeared to be fresh. Actually, they say new skin appeared in the place of another one. So they basically have changed the skin, and the old skin appeared close to the body, like what happened with a snake. And a snake, to change the skin, need to be absolutely alive. Also, they found that a lot of this body appear to be very well fed, in the sense that they appear sometimes with the belly, the stomach, very, very full. Sometimes they appear even more, let's say, fat. Let's use this politically incorrect word, but I'm very politically non-correct, so no worries about that. So they appear to be even more fat than when they were met alive. Also, they found that around the mouth usually there was fresh blood. And fresh blood around the mouth was for them the indicator, the clue, that the reason why they were still alive, the reason why they were actually growing and be very well fed in the coffin was the fact that they were drinking blood. Blood from the living. Blood from the living that they were killed by their action. This, in fact, was the reason why the coffin of these people were open. In the villages or in the city, there was a pandemic. A very actual topic, actually. But, so, there was a pandemic. People were dying. Inexplicably. So they didn't understand why. So, with an attitude that we will call looking for patient zero, they were going to exhume the first person that died before the pandemic spread out. And usually they were finding this person with the characteristic that I said before. It was a monster. He was the reason why the pandemic was spread. And so, we can read in the Calme, a lot of different ways were used to kill the monster, with the idea to stop the plague. Well, this is what is written in the book. Exactly like that, exactly as I try to summarize. Can we believe in this? As a scientist, can I believe in this? Ghosts around my house. Well, can we believe? I say, yes. We can believe. But we can explain as a scientist in a different way. First of all, we need to find the context. Why these people were exhuming bodies? As I say, there was a pandemic. A pandemic means a lot of people were dying, and in those days, people didn't know why. Think about the panic that a lot of countries are facing nowadays with the coronavirus. And we know that the coronavirus is a virus, we know how it works, and so on. Imagine this back in those days. More panic, because the reason of the pandemic were absolutely more unknown. So we should find a reason. And this is why they were opening the grave of the first people that died before the pandemic started, to try to find a reason. They didn't call patient zero, but was in some way this kind of attitude. Now, imagine this scenario. They are opening the grave, the situation, the social situation is already altered by the pandemic, and they found a body. A body with all the characteristics that have been described before. So, fresh, apparently fresh body, with a new skin, not pale, and in some reports we found that the body was even not stiffened, like not stiff, like in the rigor mortis. And we know that when a person is dead, is absolutely rigid. And they say that was a remarkable fact that this body was pliable, so was not stiff, like the one of the dead people. Well, they found that they were not able to explain why this body appeared like that, and they found a solution. Well, probably this body is the body of a monster, and probably this monster is the reason the pandemic. In Italy we say due piccioni con una fava. In English we say two birds with one stone. So we try to explain two inexplicable facts, linking them together. That is a very interesting way of how fake news were spread back in those days, in a pandemic period. So, if we think that they actually found that body and they explain it this way, we haven't still explained why that body appeared in that vampire-looking way. Was possible that was in some way alive, was feeding the body after that, was feeding itself, drinking blood, and this is why there was the new skin, this is why the belly appeared to be inflated. Well, as a forensic anthropologist, I would say no. All the characteristics that I summarized before are well-known characteristics nowadays as part of the decomposition process. A process that was not well known in the past. Because in the past, the contact with the dead bodies usually was in the first couple of days after the death, and maybe after years when the body was completely skeletonized. All the steps that occurred after few days after the death were concealed inside the coffin. The rigor mortis disappeared after a few days after the death. The skin, the most external layer of the skin, is removed by the emphysematous phases, so by the gases that are produced by the decomposition. These gases make the belly, the stomach, inflated, so it was not due to an overeating of blood, but gases inflate the body. The skin go with a process called epidermolysis, or skin slippage. And the most external layer of the skin is removed, and the people that were looking at this body, they saw only the most deeper layer of the derma that appeared nice, fresh, and pink. But this was not fresh skin, it was actually the result of the decomposition. So we explain the belly, we explain the new skin, we explain the fact that the body was not stiff anymore. But what about the blood around the mouth? Well, that can be explained by the fact that it was not blood. The reason was actually that the decomposition destroyed part of the internal organ, reason why we have the belly that is bloating, so it's basically inflated, and the gases are pushing this, let's say, fluid, decomposition fluid, through the mouth, out of the mouth, due to the pressure of the gases. So what appeared to be dark blood was actually decomposition fluids. So this is why we can believe to what is reported in the ancient reports about the vampires, and we can believe they were real fact. The only problem was that these facts were misinterpreted by the people that didn't have the required knowledges. And this is very interesting because it's telling us how the lack of knowledge and the ignorance can create monsters. Now, the question that is not solved yet is why a forensic anthropologist like me is interested in, of course, Wunderkammers, but also interested in vampires. Well, that happened because almost 15 years ago, I met one. I actually discovered the first proof of a vampire exorcism. Back in Venice, in the island of Lazzaretto Nuovo, in 2006, I was digging inside a mass grave of the plague of 1576. And I found the skeleton with a piece of evidence of a specific ritual to kill a vampire. In that case, was a piece of brick pushed inside the mouth of the individual after the death. We found the skeleton, and we found the evidence on the skeleton that the body was partially exhumed when the body was not completely decomposed. So this is perfectly have a sense on what I said before. And when they found the body, partially decomposed, they thought that was a vampire. But a specific kind of vampire that is called Nachtzerer. In the German belief and in the Kashubian belief, that is an area of north of Poland, the Nachtzerer was a vampire responsible specifically of the Black Death. By the way, this superstition was also spread around all Europe. The only way to kill this kind of vampire was not using all the other tools that later on, if you want, we can discuss for killing a vampire, but was kill the vampire by starvation. This vampire was not going around drinking the blood of the people, but was actually chewing his own shroud, so the funerary cloth in which they were wrapped. And the only way to do this was put a piece of stone, a piece of brick, or a coin inside their mouth. This is what I found in Venice. But again, how I can explain this idea of let's say, vampire that is chewing the shroud in his own coffin? Because if this is what we found, it means that this kind of report have a sort of truth behind. Well, you remember what I said just before, the fact that the fluid of the decomposition were pushed outside the mouth. Now, think about this. During the pandemic, a lot of people were not put inside the coffin, but were put inside, just wrapped inside their own funeral cloth, sometimes just the bed sheet in which they died. Now, if you do that and you put the body in a mass grave, what happened is this. The lack of rigor mortis will make the jaw and the mouth open after a few days. The purge fluid are coming out due to the emphysematous phase of the decomposition, and they will make the shroud wet, and they will accelerate just around the mouth area where the fluids are pushed outside, the decomposition of the fabric of the shroud quicker. Also, the fact that the person is wrapped in the shroud and covered with soil will make the soil pushing deeper inside the mouth that now is open of the corpse, going deeper inside the mouth. So the shroud is deeper in the mouth, the decomposition is accelerated just in that area of the shroud, and of course the appearance, when you accidentally, as happened for the vampire of Venice, is accidentally discovered, you will think that the vampire is actually chewing the shroud. And this is why that lady, because it was a lady, the skeleton that we discovered in 2006, was exorcised in the sense that it was in some way killed with a sort of a superstition act. I don't want to mix the Roman Catholic exorcism with this. So this is how I went in contact with the vampire world, actually, and this is how I started my research in the vampire world back in 2006, and the result of this have been published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences, that is the main journal for forensic sciences in the world, have been presented at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. It, again, is the biggest meeting for forensic scientists and forensic anthropologists in the world, and also part of this research have been followed and supported by National Geographic Society with a documentary that you can find still sometimes in the National Geographic channel, but also in DVD, that is called Forensic Vampire. Over there, if you looked at documentary, you can also see the reconstruction of the face of this lady that I did for that documentary. I usually exhibit that face in the exhibition that I organize for my Wunderkammer. This is why usually my exhibition are called the Professor Van Helsing Wunderkammer or Professor Van Helsing Cabinet of Curiosities, because the vampire usually has a main role, but unfortunately it is now in my office in the university and I cannot reach for this live, but I'm sure that if we, Christian will organize other meeting, I will be able in the future to bring to your attention. Now we will see what Christian would like to ask, maybe if some of you already wrote some of the questions, and then I will be happy to show some of the stuff from my vampire and my Wunderkammer collection.
Okay. Can you, everybody can hear me?
I hear you perfectly. I don't know the others.
Very good. Okay, picture should come up soon. So thank you first for your interesting talk.
Very welcome.
Because that was the first time that I heard somebody talk about that topic, not in kind of fictional terms, you know. So the fascination with the bizarre and the fantastical, did you have that already when you were a child?
Well, yes. I think that a lot of children are fascinated by bizarre, weird, sometimes gross stuff. I was fascinated more by magic and some aspect of the world, like the Inquisition or the like exhibit on torture instruments and things like that. But also, I was fascinated by the idea of collecting stuff.
Okay.
I learned since as I was a kid that if you have objects, interesting objects, you can be an interesting person as well. I didn't have a lot of friends. Actually, I didn't have friends when I was a kid. And I started to have my little bag with toys or strange things that I was carrying around when I was playing maybe by myself and I was on a holiday with my family. And at that moment, I saw that other kids were coming, want to play with the objects, want to see the object, and this was a way to gathering new friends. And this continued later on, even nowadays, because when I moved in England 7 years ago, I didn't know anyone. I was completely alone. But I have my object. I have a room that I dedicated to my hobby, that is magic, with a lot of tools. And I started to meet other magicians that were interested by my object as well. So they came in my house. They start to share things with me, and this is how I met my new friends in Liverpool. Don't take me wrong, doesn't mean that these friendships are utilitaristic, are related to the object only, but that is a medium, is a way for me at least to have new friends.
No, absolutely. I mean that's why we call these things conversation maker, right? I mean that's quite literally. Yeah. It's quite literally all conversation makers. I mean all these objects that always fascinated me as well. Yeah. So I think everybody watching, first you can throw in questions. There was somebody actually asking if they were buried, how did they leave their graves?
Well, they were not eating the grave. They were eating inside the grave. That was the idea. And it was the idea.
Not leaving. Okay.
They were able to go outside the grave. Now, that is another interesting point. If you think about what we place nowadays on the grave, is the tombstone, right? Yeah. So this, or the cross. Now, this is the simplification of what was put on the grave in the previous era. So if we go back, for example, in the Neolithic time or in the Roman, any kind of era in the past, stones or monuments were built above the grave. And the idea was that we keep the grave covered. We avoid that the corpse can rise. And this started 130,000 years ago when the Neanderthals start to dig the first graves for other humans. They were putting stones above the grave. Why? So how, as a scientist, I always try to find an explanation of this kind of, let's say, religious act. Why they did this? Because they found, at least for them, evidence that the body were able to resurrect. Because they were finding grave, digged, and maybe part of the remains outside, like they were going out of the grave. Of course, were not the corpse that was digging to go out, but were animals that were attracted by the smell of the corpse. They were digging from above.
Yes.
If you put stones, you avoid that the animals do this. So that is the reason.
So how? Maybe I missed that before, but how far back is going the first historical evidence of people believing that humans can actually come back from the dead, like physically? Like,
well, I think that that idea we cannot prove. We cannot prove when we talk about prehistoric times. We can only try to imagine according to this kind of act that I say. But as soon as we have records, written records about histories or stories or legend, we have the proof that people believe in the spirits or in the body that they can come back. All the human culture have this idea that the spirit, in some way, the spirit of the dead, sometimes with a body, and that is when we talk about revenants, because the revenant is not a ghost, it's actually a body that is not completely dead, is coming back. All the culture have this kind of belief. However, we cannot talk about vampires. The idea of vampires is specifically from the, let's say, 15th century in Europe, because it's very related, 15th, 16th century, is very related to the Christian culture. Because the Christian culture is talking about the fact that we will resurrect with our body at the end of the time, during the Armageddon and the final judgment. So that is the moment in which we will rise, because God is allowing us to rise with our body. If you do before, that is because demons or demonic powers are actually taking control of your body, and this is why we need to destroy your body. So that is why the vampire is very embedded in the Christian Europe and from the 15th century onward. We have some stories that in some way can send back the idea, that is the Libencio Chronicle, and we are back in the 11th century in Russia, but it's difficult to call this creature proper vampires.
okay. So maybe I think the audience would love to see inside the box.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm more than happy to show. This is a vampire hunting a kid that represent more or less all the tools that can be used or could be used for killing a vampire. We have from, let's say, the holy water to the crucifix, and these two objects are underlying the fact that the vampire is a creature against the Christian belief system. So all the things that are related to holy water, the use of crucifix, are telling us the fact that the vampire was something that was going against the Christian belief, and this is why I say vampires are, let's say, a byproduct of the Christian religions. Here you have a coin that is something, as I said, can be placed inside the mouth for the Nachtzeller. Of course, we have to keep the vampire away from the house, the salt. The salt is used even in the modern Christian exorcism. Here we have the garlic. Now the garlic is very interesting because garlic was used in the ancient medicine to, let's say, protect the person against the miasma. The miasma was the bad air, the air in which the disease was living. Nowadays, we talk about droplets, we talk about the virus in the air for the corona. Yes. They didn't know that. But in the past, there was this idea of the miasma, so the bad air that can create plague. Now, how you can protect yourself by the bad air? Using an even stronger smell that can be used like a filter.
Okay.
Contraris contraria curant. That was the idea in medicine. And the garlic was one of the herbs that were put inside the beak of the mask of the plague doctor that we saw, for example, in the Venetian carnival. That was a real mask used by a doctor, not exactly like that, but very similar. So this is why the use of the garlic. Then what we have? Well, we have some seeds here, and the seeds are very interesting because it seems that some of these creatures have a sort of a compulsory disorder. So, let's say, how is you call in England CPD, I think. So the idea was that you can take a bunch of seeds, put in front of the door of your house, and this will stop the vampire to come in. Why? Because the vampire, it found a lot of equal objects. It was pushed to count them. So he started to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When he reached the number 7, that was a magical number since at least the biblical term, was not able to count above. So he had to start back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then again from the beginning. In this way, the vampire was passing all his time there counting until his, let's say, clock was stroking times. According to some religion, was midday. Other stories talk about the rise of the sun. He has to go back in his coffin. So, finish of the story. You can protect yourself. Here, I cannot bring the sun inside the vampire kit, but here I have the ashes of a vampire that have been burned by the exposure to the sun. Of course, the sun is the symbol of light, is the symbol of God, is the symbol of Jesus, if we want, and a demonic or creature of the night, like a vampire, can only be destroyed by the sun. Then I have, a candle and some matches, because it's very good that you burn the body of the vampire. Maybe you can burn after you decapitate with a razor blade or whatever the vampire. Why burning the body? Scientifically, I would say that if you find a body that is not completely decomposed, the best way to rid of it is the cremation. That is my scientific explanation. However, the explanation back in those days was the fact that the cremation was absolutely forbidden by the Roman Catholic Church, because you should not destroy the body, because you need the body to resurrect at the Armageddon, at the final judgment. However, because the vampire resurrects before the time, and he resurrects against God's will and against God's authorization, we will destroy his body, because in this way, at the end of the time, he will not be able to resurrect again. So it's a double punishment for the eternal life.
Yeah, sorry.
Also,
Matteo,
yeah.
Sorry, we just have some questions from people watching. So first is we have Christian Chalman is asking if you read the Don Calmet in French, because apparently there are some nuances that can't be translated.
No, I read Don Calmet in the Italian version, and I read the Dissertatio de Masticazioni Mortorum in Tumulis by Philippus Rohr directly from Latin. But I know Latin very well. I know Italian, I would say, even better. I know English roughly, but unfortunately I don't know French.
Okay.
So.
And then we have, and then he also asked if you have a written source for the vampire counting to number 7.
I can backtrack, because I published an article about that, and I can backtrack where I read and maybe answer later on, because now it's not on the top of my mind. It could be, but I'm not sure. On vampire in Europe.
Yeah, because it's really interesting, because this compulsion of counting is also attributed to other demons. Like in Switzerland, we have a so-called Alp ghost. So like in the Alps, in the mountains, where like people are with their sheep herds. So at night there is a demon that is sitting on somebody's chest and pressing the air out. And,
that is very interesting.
And to get him you can distract him by put pieces of pepper or corn, like you said, on the side of your bed. So in the night when this demon comes, he also has to first count all the peppercorns, which will keep him busy until sunlight enters and he can't kill you. So I think that's...
this action of pressing the chest is very common for vampires as well. And there are two explanations. One of these is the disorder that you can have, is basically a respiratory disorder that you can have associated to other kind of disease, for example, like pneumonia, but also tuberculosis. Usually in some hour of the day, according to the circadian rhythm, you can have a problem related to the breathing, and that is one of the sensations that you can have, and was one of the sensations that was associated to the vampires, as well as the sleep paralysis. The awareness during sleep paralysis that is also associated to in the modern day to the idea of alien abduction. So it is a scientific explanation of this kind of nonsense. I hope that I haven't hurt the feeling of anyone that believe in aliens, but if I have, I don't care. I'm politically not correct under this point of. I'm a scientist after all. I just finished about another couple of things. One is this, a nail, because nails were used to nail the body on the bottom of the coffin to avoid that it resurrect. And sometimes the body or the, let's say, the cloth of the corpse were nailed inside the coffin before any kind of exhumation. So just at the moment of the funeral, because there were some people that were believed to be, let's say, more easily became a vampire. And these were people maybe with red hair in some culture, people left hand in some culture, like my friend Stefano Cavanna, that is both left hand and red hair. So Stefano, I'm sorry, that is your fate. Other things were, for example, people that were born with the shirt. So I mean people that were born with the amniotic sac around when they, during birth. Another way to stop the vampire in the grave for the same reason was place on the corpse or on the coffin roses or thorns, because the spike can keep the vampire inside, because if he poking himself against the spike, he will not be able to rise from the grave. Actually, these are very good to keep animal away from, exhuming the body. Okay. So we go back to the idea of the tombstone. Okay. And of course, if we go back inside the second layer of our vampire hunting kit, we have the classical stick and the hammer, but something that not a lot of people talk about is a piece of leather, because it was recommended to put a piece of leather on the body and then use the stick against the body, because in this way we can avoid the splash of the blood draped by the vampire on the face of the vampire hunter. In reality, this actually avoids that when you poke a corpse during the gaseous phases, it will just splash the decomposition fluid on your face, because it's full of gases that they can have this kind of action. And this is something that we know from the experience in the morgue as a forensic scientist.
So we have maybe two more questions, and then we already have to get ready for the next lecture. So I'm sorry, it's a short format, but I think people are really enjoying it, Matteo. So really,
we have some Italian speaker. They can connect later on at 7 p.m. Italian time to another live that this is organized by Max Vellucci for a direct call Bene o Malox, where I will talk about vampire hunting again. So if any of the Italian speakers want, please join me later on. I will put a link on my Facebook page and on the Facebook page of my, let's say, performance alter ego that is the great Borrini.
Okay. So Stefan is asking if Jesus was a vampire technically.
Well, not that I would say, but that would be a very erratic idea.
Yeah.
Also because, you know, if you look at that, it's exactly the opposite. Because the vampire is drinking and is taking your blood for his own resurrection. Jesus is offering his blood for our own resurrection. So Jesus is doing for our redemption from the sin, while who is a victim of a vampire is condemned to the hell as well. So if we read that there are a lot of opposite images. Jesus can walk on the water,
yeah.
while he cannot cross water. So there are a lot of absolutely, let's say, opposite images between Jesus and the vampires.
But it's funny because witches also can stay on the water and don't drown. So that's also an interesting thing. So thank you very much, Matteo. People will be able to just shoot you personal message if they want to have, because there were some questions we couldn't answer. So just find Matteo Borrini on Facebook and just drop him a message, and I'm sure he will take time to answer some of them. So thank you very much. And we're actually going to meet one of your countrymen now, Ivan Censi from Bazar Bizarro. So I'm really delighted. So I'm seeing him in about 15 minutes. I'm going to have a snack and get myself a drink. So Matteo, I wish you a good evening.
I wish you a good evening as well, and thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for all the friends that joined this amazing idea that you had. Thank you. Enjoy. Stay safe.
Stay safe. Bye, Matteo. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Take care.